My grandfather's family tradition put my 12-year-old brother in the hospital, so I gathered evidence and vanished on my 18th birthday. A year later, my cousin told me the younger boys were starting to refuse too. In my family, all the boys had to follow one rule: make your cousin bleed or go hungry for the week. You see, every Saturday, all my male cousins between the ages 10 and 18 would gather in my grandfather's garage. 2 boys entered the chalk circle. Only the one who made his opponent bleed got to eat dinner for the next week. They called it building brotherhood through suffering. My grandfather started this tradition after returning from Vietnam. I watched soft American boys die crying for their mothers, he'd tell us, his glass eyes scanning our faces. No grandson of mine will be weak. My uncles enforced the rules with pride. Uncle Marco kept a photo album of his fight victories, pages of his cousins' bloody faces from the 1980s. So when I turned 10, I spent my birthday standing in the fight garage for the first time, surrounded by cousins nursing old wounds. I tried to tell myself it wouldn't be that bad, that I could just force myself to zone out and pretend it wasn't happening. Boy, was I wrong. Turns out, it wasn't just drawing blood. You fought until blood hit the concrete floor. No medical help until the winner was finished eating their dinner. Winners ate like kings, while losers sat at the same table, watching. Brothers fought brothers. Fathers placed bets. First fight's always special, Uncle Tony announced, pushing me toward the circle. My opponent, my cousin Luis, also 10, also terrified. The men formed a wall around us, chanting, "Blood brings brotherhood," over and over. Luis and I circled each other, neither of us wanting to throw the first punch. "Hit him!" my father screamed. So I did. I hit him until his nose cracked and red drops splattered the floor. That night I ate chicken and rice while Luis sat across from me with an empty plate and a towel pressed to his face. The months that followed broke something in all of us. My 12-year-old brother Anthony nearly lost his left eye fighting our cousin David. Roberto, once the sweetest kid, learned to fight dirty, fish hooking eyes and biting chunks from ears. "Gotta eat," he'd say afterward, spitting blood. By my 15th fight, I'd only won 7 times. Not enough to avoid the hollow feeling of hunger, but enough to know the sick satisfaction of watching others go without. I hated who I was becoming. And our community was so small that over half of the teachers at my school were somewhat related to us, so they made sure no questions got asked. I knew if I didn't find an answer soon, then my life would be over. But I wanted the problem to go away by itself, and one day, it did. We were preparing for the spring play when the drama teacher showed us theatrical blood packets, tiny pouches that burst on impact, creating realistic blood effects. That was my light bulb moment. I pocketed a few every day to test out my idea, so by the time Saturday came around, I palmed a packet before entering the chalk circle. When my cousin Marco grabbed me in a headlock, I slapped the packet against my nose until fake blood poured down my face. "Blood on the floor!" Uncle Tony shouted. Marco won. I went hungry, and for the first time, I wasn't mad about it. Instead, I focused on stealing more packets. I taught my younger cousins the technique during bathroom breaks. We developed a system, choreographed moves that looked brutal but caused no damage. A fake stumble here, a packet slap there. For 3 beautiful months, we outsmarted our fathers. We rotated wins based on who needed food most. My little brother was smiling again. We were actors, not gladiators. Everything was going smoothly until my granddad turned to my cousin's unmarked face after a brutal fight. "Where are the bruises?" he asked. "How did they heal so fast?" The room went silent, and I pretended to find the peas on my plate extremely fascinating. We thought he'd forget about it, but he didn't. And the next Saturday, everything changed. Strip searches, metal detectors, uncles stationed as referees inside the circle. When they found the blood packets taped inside Domingo's waistband, my grandfather made an example of him. 3 18-year-olds against 1 14-year-old. Real blood, real screams. Domingo didn't walk right for weeks. "You're next," my father promised me that night. "Fight like a man, or I'll show you what real brotherhood means." I didn't say a word before pulling out my phone. I've been recording these fights for 8 months. Every beating, every forced starvation. It's all uploaded to a cloud drive that CPS and the police already have access to. Every word of what I said was a lie, but it didn't matter. All that mattered was that they stopped with the violence, once and for all. "We're done bleeding for you," Luis announced. Vincent was already on a call. "Police? We need help at 1847 Oakwood Drive. Child abuse in progress." The garage erupted into chaos. Grandfather's hands trembled as he reached for Vincent's phone, but my cousin yanked it away, backing toward the door. The distant wail of sirens made everyone freeze. "You're bluffing, boy," Grandfather said, his glass eye fixed on me while his good eye darted between the windows. His hands shook as he gestured for everyone to stay calm, but I saw the fear creeping into his weathered face. Father lunged toward me, but Luis and Vincent stepped between us. Luis still had dried blood under his fingernails from our fake fight earlier. "This ends tonight, Uncle," he said, voice steady despite everything. I forced myself to maintain the lie even as my voice cracked. "Check your phones at midnight. Everything goes live." 8 months of evidence. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my chin up, meeting Grandfather's stare. A small gasp came from the corner. Anthony had found our 8-year-old cousin Miguel huddled behind the tool cabinet, holding his dad's phone up, recording everything. The red light blinked like an accusation. Uncle Marco snatched the phone from Miguel's tiny hands, his thick fingers fumbling with the screen as he deleted the video. But Miguel whispered something that made Marco's face drain of color. "I already sent it to Mom." The sirens grew louder, then suddenly veered away toward another street. Vincent's panicked call had given the wrong address. The room exhaled collectively, but their relief was too visible, too guilty. "Family meeting, now inside the house," Grandfather commanded, his authority reasserting itself. He pointed at Roberto. "Check the streets. Make sure they're really gone. Nobody leaves until we settle this." We filed into the main house like prisoners. The mothers emerged from the kitchen, confusion shifting to horror as they took in the blood on their sons' clothes. They'd known about the fights, pretended not to see, but the starvation element was news to some of them. My mother's face crumpled when she saw my bruised cheek clearly for the first time under the bright kitchen lights. "I thought it was just roughhousing," she said, but her voice broke on the lie she'd been telling herself for years. Grandfather stood at the head of the dining table, the same table where winners ate while losers starved. "Anyone who walks out that door tonight is dead to this family. No money, no help, nothing." 3 mothers were already gathering their children, coats half on, car keys jingling. My Aunt Catherine held her twin boys close, both sporting fresh bruises from tonight's interrupted fight. Uncle Tony moved to block the front door, his bulk filling the frame. Nobody's going anywhere until we know what evidence actually exists. This could ruin all of us. During the standoff, Luis caught my eye and showed me his phone screen. He'd been recording audio for the past hour. The battery indicator showed 2%. My stomach dropped. Our only real evidence was dying in his hand. Then the lights went out. Roberto had reached the breaker box. In the sudden darkness, furniture crashed and adults shouted. Someone's elbow caught me in the ribs as as bodies collided in the confusion. The bathroom window, Vincent hissed in my ear. 5 of us scrambled through the small window while our fathers cursed and stumbled in the dark. We hit the ground running, splitting up without discussion. The younger boys headed for my friend Jake's house 3 blocks over. Vincent, Luis, and I ran toward the 24-hour McDonald's on Main Street. Luis's house was closer, so we tried there first. His mother answered the door in her robe, face pinched with worry. Behind her, I could see Luis's father's silhouette in the hallway. "Your grandfather already called," she said, not meeting our eyes. "Get away from here, now." The door slammed in our faces. My phone buzzed constantly. Texts flooded in, threats from uncles, pleas from mothers asking if we were safe, demands from fathers wanting our location. Each message made my hands shake harder. At McDonald's, we'd barely ordered when the manager approached our booth. "Your grandfather called, said you boys are runaways. I need to call the police." The security camera's red light blinked above us like Miguel's phone had. We left our untouched food and ran again. Desperate, I called Ms. Rodriguez, my drama teacher. She answered on the 5th ring, voice thick with sleep. When I explained, she agreed to meet us at the school. Something in her tone seemed off, but I was too desperate to question it. She was waiting in the parking lot when we arrived, but she wasn't alone. Principal Morrison stood beside her, arms crossed. "Your family's worried sick," Ms. Rodriguez said, not meeting my eyes. She'd called them first. Of course she had. Half the school staff was related to us somehow. We bolted through the gymnasium, but Anthony twisted his ankle jumping the chain-link fence. His cry of pain echoed across the empty basketball court. Now, we had to move slower, supporting him between us. Dawn came with nowhere safe to go. My bank card got declined at 3 different ATMs. Grandfather had already made his calls, closed ranks overnight. Luis's phone finally died, taking our only recording with it. The local morning news played on a TV in a shop window. "Police are searching for several runaway teens from a concerned immigrant family," the anchor said. I recognized her. She was my grandmother's hairdresser's daughter. "Maybe if we apologize," Vincent suggested, exhaustion making him sway on his feet. Domingo's little brother Sean had joined us during the night. He pulled up his shirt, showing fresh bruises across his ribs. "This is what happened after you left. Dad gave me a lesson about family loyalty. I made a decision. I'll go to the police alone. You guys find somewhere to hide." The police station smelled like burnt coffee and disappointment. I'd barely started explaining when I saw Uncle Marco through the glass partition, filing a missing persons report at the next desk. The officer behind the glass partition glanced between Uncle Marco and me, her expression shifting from boredom to confusion. She held up a finger, signaling me to wait, then buzzed me through to a small interview room that reeked of stale cigarettes and cleaning solution. 20 minutes passed before Detective Chen entered, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a notepad. He set 1 cup in front of me, then settled into the metal chair across the table. His wedding ring clinked against the table as he opened his notepad. "Your uncle says you've been having some troubles at home," he began, voice neutral. "Want to tell me your side?" I wrapped my hands around the warm cup, gathering courage. The words tumbled out. The garage, the fights, the blood, the hunger. Detective Chen's pen moved across the page, but his expression grew increasingly skeptical as I spoke. When I finished, he set down his pen and leaned back. "So you're telling me your grandfather makes you boys? Box? Like a boxing club?" "Not boxing," I corrected. "Frustration building. Fighting until someone bleeds. Kids go hungry if they lose." He rubbed his temple, then called in his partner, Officer Petrosian, whose nameplate caught the fluorescent light. The moment Petrosian heard my story, his face hardened into something I recognized too well. "Listen, kid," Petrosian said, crossing his arms. "These old country families have different ways. My own grandfather used to make us wrestle. It's not abuse, it's tradition. You can't just call it abuse because you don't like it." My protests fell on deaf ears. Within an hour, they released me to Uncle Marco's custody. Granddad chaired the local VFW and had loaned half the town money, so favors were effortless. The ride home stretched endlessly, Uncle Marco's knuckles white on the steering wheel as he made promises about grandfather's mercy if I'd just recant. We passed Luis's house. His family's car was gone, driveway empty. Back home, grandfather had transformed into the concerned patriarch. He sat in his leather chair, surrounded by my aunts and uncles, playing the worried elder to perfection. "Boys fight," he told the room, shaking his head sadly. "It's natural. This one has imagination problems. Too much time with those theater people." The next morning, a social worker arrived, a tired-looking woman named Ms. Patel, who interviewed me with my entire family present. Grandfather sat beside me, his hand heavy on my shoulder, while my parents flanked me on the other side. Every question she asked got filtered through the weight of their presence. "Has anyone ever hurt you?" she asked, pen poised over her clipboard. Grandfather's fingers tightened imperceptibly on my shoulder. My mother's foot tapped against mine under the table. Once, twice, a warning. "No," I heard myself say. "Just normal family stuff." Ms. Patel left with promises to follow up, but we all knew she wouldn't. Budget slashed, CPS closed 200 files that month. Ours was another statistic. The system was overwhelmed, and we looked like a close-knit family dealing with a rebellious teenager. That night, I lay awake planning. The photo album, Uncle Marco's trophy collection, still existed somewhere. While the house slept, I crept to grandfather's study and lifted his car keys from the hook by the door. My hands shook like his had in the garage, trembling with the weight of what I was about to do. His study smelled of pipe tobacco and old leather. I searched methodically, checking drawers, shelves, the closet. Finally, behind a row of accounting ledgers, I found it. The album's leather cover was worn smooth from handling. I opened it eagerly, ready to photograph the evidence with an old digital camera I'd found, but the pages showed only normal family photos. Birthday parties, graduations, holiday dinners. Every violent image had been carefully replaced, as if decades of brutality had never existed. Looking for something? My mother stood in the doorway, her robe tied tight around her thin frame. In the moonlight, I could see how much weight she'd lost recently, her cheekbones sharp under papery skin. "Mom, I need those photos, the real ones." She closed the door behind her, moving to sit on the ottoman near me. "I know about the hunger," she said quietly. "I've known all along. But what choice do I have? Leave with nothing? Your father lost his job 3 months ago. Your grandfather pays our mortgage, your sister's school tuition, everything." The weight of her words settled over me like a shroud. "So we just keep bleeding? You play along until you're 18, she said, not meeting my eyes. "Then you leave. That's what survivors do." Saturday approached with the inevitability of a funeral. Grandfather announced a special exhibition match for my return, promising the family would see me properly educated. The other escaped cousins had trickled back home throughout the week, each with similar stories. No money, nowhere to go, parents who chose security over their children's safety. Vincent returned with his arm in a sling, claiming a skateboarding accident. Luis came back silent, his recording device mysteriously missing. Even brave little Sean was back, moving carefully to avoid aggravating his ribs. Friday night, grandfather visited my room. He sat on my desk chair, looking older than I'd ever seen him, but no less dangerous. "Your father tried this at your age," he said conversationally. thought he could change things. Now look, he needs me for everything. Through my doorway, I could see my father hovering in the hall, shoulders slumped in defeat. I'm offering you a deal, grandfather continued. Fight once more, properly. Show the family you understand your place. Then you can quit. I'll even pay for college. But this rebellion ends tomorrow. His face darkened. Then watch what happens to Vincent tomorrow, and it will be your fault. Saturday arrived with storm clouds gathering overhead. They locked me in my room during fight preparations, but I could hear everything through the floor. The scrape of feet on concrete, the men's voices placing bets, the nervous laughter of boys trying to seem brave. Then Vincent's screams started, different from the usual sounds of combat. These were pure agony. I threw myself against the door, ramming my shoulder into it until the handle broke. Racing downstairs, I found blood pooling under the garage door. Inside was chaos. Vincent lay unconscious on the concrete, blood flowing from a head wound. The adults stood frozen, genuinely shocked. Grandfather had let the fight go too far, using Vincent to make his point. My mother finally snapped. Enough! She screamed, pushing past Uncle Tony. Call 911 now! This ends tonight! The room split instantly. Some wives rushed to Vincent's side, while others tried to silence my mother. Aunt Catherine was already dialing, tears streaming down her face. The ambulance arrived in minutes, paramedics loading Vincent onto a gurney. Grandfather told them about a skateboarding accident, his voice steady and convincing. But the EMT, a young woman with keen eyes, noted the inconsistencies in the injury pattern. She made notes on her tablet, exchanging glances with her partner. 40 minutes later, after the sirens and the frantic ride, at the hospital, I cornered a nurse named Patricia and told her everything. She listened carefully, documenting every word, but her expression grew sympathetic rather than hopeful. Without the victim's cooperation, it's just hearsay, she explained gently. If Vincent confirms your grandfather's story, he did. When Vincent woke, his parents hovering nearby, he looked directly at the doctor and said he'd fallen while skateboarding, but he squeezed my hand when no one was looking, an apology in his grip. Patricia showed me something that made my blood run cold. The hospital's computer system had records of cousin after cousin coming in over the years. Broken noses, cracked ribs, concussions, all explained away individually, but together they painted a clear pattern. I see what this is, Patricia said quietly, but I need a family member over 18 to make an official report, someone with standing. In the hospital waiting room, my mother wavered. Maybe now, she began, but my father cut her off with a look, reminding her of our sister's futures, their dependence on grandfather's money. I returned home to find my belongings piled on the front lawn. Grandfather stood in the doorway, arms crossed. You're no longer welcome in this house, he announced, but legally, I can't kick out a minor. You'll sleep in the garage. The garage still reeked of blood and fear. The chalk circle remained, stained darker in places. I made a bed from old moving blankets in the corner, trying not to think about all the violence these walls had witnessed. While cleaning, I found a tooth wedged between two floorboards. Monday morning, the school counselor called me in. Mrs. Vance sat behind her desk, hands folded, concern painted across her face. Your grandfather called. He's worried about your mental health. These accusations you've been making. Mandatory therapy sessions started that week. Dr. Brennan's office was expensively furnished, all leather and dark wood. He listened to my story with professional interest, making notes that I knew would paint me as delusional. Your grandfather is paying for these sessions, he revealed during our third meeting. He wants what's best for you. Sometimes trauma can make us misremember events, create false narratives. I realized then what was happening. Every word I spoke was being documented as evidence of my instability. Grandfather was building a case that I was mentally ill, ensuring no one would believe me. The next Saturday, I tried to record the fights from my hiding spot in the garage rafters. Roberto caught me, crushing my phone under his boot while the other cousins watched. None of them helped. They'd learned the price of defiance. Without a phone, I started handwriting everything in a journal, documenting dates, injuries, participants. And I hid it in my locker at school, thinking it was safe. But the janitor found it during routine cleaning and, following protocol, turned it in to the principal. Principal Morrison called a family meeting about the disturbing fantasies in my journal. Grandfather sat in the office, shaking his head sadly as the principal expressed concern about my violent imagination and false memories. Even Jake's parents grew concerned when grandfather sent them Dr. Brennan's preliminary assessment. Maybe you do need help, Jake's mother suggested gently when I tried to stay at their house. These delusions seem serious. Desperate, I went to the local newspaper. The editor, Mr. Garrison, listened politely as I laid out my story. He took notes, asked questions, but I could see the skepticism in his eyes. This is a serious accusation, he said finally. We'd need proof, corroboration. Without that, it's just hearsay. And frankly, accusing a respected community elder of something this heinous. I returned home to find grandfather had been busy. The few remaining fight trophies were gone, leaving empty spaces on shelves and walls. The family was erasing its violent history in real time, removing any trace of evidence. Luis found me that night, sitting alone in the garage. He looked exhausted, defeated. I never had recordings, he admitted. I lied to support your bluff. I thought it would work, thought they'd stop. I'm sorry. The truth of our situation crystallized then. Grandfather's goal wasn't just about fighting, it was about control. Complete dominion until boys turned 18 and left voluntarily, too broken to ever challenge the family hierarchy again. I had to survive 2 more years. I started documenting everything in hidden locations, using library computers to write accounts, storing notes in a locker at the bus station. Every piece of evidence carefully hidden where family couldn't reach. To maintain my cover and avoid worse punishment, I was forced to attend fights as an observer. I sat on an overturned bucket in the corner, watching cousins bloody each other while I took mental notes. The younger boys had started shunning me, grandfather's propaganda taking root in fresh minds. One small victory came when I convinced 2 mothers to schedule their sons' activities during fight nights. Piano lessons and soccer practice became shields. But grandfather noticed the pattern within weeks and began scheduling fights randomly, Sunday mornings, Wednesday evenings, whenever it suited him. My father finally spoke to me privately one evening, catching me alone in the garage. He looked older than his years, worn down by decades of submission. I'm saving money, he whispered, glancing nervously at the door. When you turn 18, I'll help you leave. Just survive until then. But surviving meant watching 10-year-olds enter the circle. It meant seeing boys I'd tried to protect learn to embrace violence. Some cousins now practiced fighting voluntarily, fully indoctrinated into the system. My carefully hidden documentation was discovered when my aunt cleaned the library during a volunteer shift. She destroyed everything to protect the family, she later told me. Her own son was approaching fight age, and she couldn't risk the tradition ending. Alliances shifted constantly as younger boys reached 10. Some embraced the tradition, seeing it as a path to grandfather's approval. Others approached me secretly, begging for help I couldn't give. Roberto shocked everyone when he broke. The toughest fighter in our generation, he pulled me aside one night, exhaustion written across his scarred face. I'm tired of hurting hurting cousins, he admitted, but I'm in too deep to quit now. Together, we created a new evidence cache, using Roberto's inside knowledge to document everything. We hid it in an abandoned building near the railroad tracks, a place where I sometimes slept to avoid the garage's oppressive atmosphere. 3 mothers instituted family dinners on fight nights, giving their boys excuses to miss. Grandfather retaliated by moving fights to Sunday mornings, adapting his tradition to maintain control. The younger cousin's transformation hurt most. Boys who once played together now practiced combat moves voluntarily, believing grandfather's rhetoric about strength and brotherhood. The indoctrination was complete for many of them. Then came a breakthrough. Miguel, the 8-year-old who'd filmed that first night, had kept recording secretly. He showed me clear video of grandfather himself beating Domingo during a demonstration, blood spattering as he showed the older boys proper technique. But the video included me in the frame, watching without intervening. My complicity was apparent, even if forced. My mother found my evidence cache while following me one evening. She confronted me in the abandoned building, tears streaming down her gaunt face. "You'll destroy us all for your principles?" she demanded. "I've been skipping meals to save money. Your sisters need their education, and you want to burn it all down?" I made a decision then. Survival over justice. I would wait until 18 to act, gathering evidence for the future rather than the present. The next fight night, grandfather forced me to referee a match between 2 10-year-olds, fresh-faced boys who'd never fought before. I stood in the circle, counting blood drops on concrete, fully complicit in the system I'd tried to destroy. Grandfather smiled from his chair, knowing he'd won this round. Vincent had recovered but changed. The head injury left him with periodic headaches, but something else had shifted too. He pulled me aside one night, whispering urgently, "I'm recording everything now. Really recording. For when we're older, when we can actually do something." A network formed quietly, cousins documenting in secret, planning for a future reckoning. The resistance had gone underground, more careful, but not defeated. As my 18th birthday approached, grandfather made an announcement that sent ice through my veins. "Our prodigal son will have one final lesson," he declared at dinner. "On his birthday, he fights. Then he can leave with my blessing, or stay with my respect." The implications were clear. One last humiliation, one final breaking, and then I'd be free to leave, if I could still walk. The cousins whispered about who my opponent would be. Some thought Roberto, despite our recent alliance. Others suspected grandfather would import someone from another branch of the family, someone without our shared history. But I knew better. I'd seen how grandfather operated, how he twisted loyalty into weapons. It would be Luis. My first opponent would be my last, the circle closing with poetic cruelty. And Luis, now fully indoctrinated, would fight to truly hurt me. The boy who'd once stood beside me against our fathers had become grandfather's perfect soldier. The evidence we'd gathered sat in various hiding spots around town. Digital files on library computers, physical documents in bus station lockers, videos on old phones hidden in abandoned buildings, a scattered archive of violence waiting for the right moment. But that moment felt impossibly far away as I sat in the garage, listening to the latest fight through the walls, the wet sound of impact, the cheers of men reliving their own brutal youths, the silence of mothers who'd chosen security over their son's safety. 2 more months until my birthday. 2 more months of watching, documenting, surviving. 2 more months of being complicit in the very system I'd tried to destroy. The chalk circle waited, patient and hungry, ready for one last feeding. Sunday morning arrived with grandfather's new schedule. I watched from the garage doorway as mothers hurried their sons past, claiming urgent church obligations. 3 families managed to avoid the morning fight, but grandfather's eyes tracked each absence with cold calculation. Roberto cornered me behind the tool shed afterward. His knuckles were split from demonstrating holds on the younger boys. "Your birthday's in 6 weeks, he said, checking over his shoulder. "Luis has been training extra. Grandfather's been coaching him personally." The following week, grandfather instituted surprise inspections. He'd appear at piano lessons, soccer practices, even school events, ensuring his grandsons weren't hiding behind manufactured excuses. Mrs. Chen's piano recital got cancelled when grandfather showed up, demanding her students return for family obligations. I spent nights at the abandoned building, adding to our evidence cache. Roberto brought photos of medical records he'd stolen from his mother's filing cabinet. Years of emergency room visits, all carefully documented. We wrapped everything in plastic, hiding it beneath rotting floorboards. 2 cousins approached me separately that week. 12-year-old Marcus, whose fight debut was approaching, begged for the blood packet trick. I had to explain why it wouldn't work anymore, watching hope drain from his face. 8-year-old Carlos just wanted to know if the hunger would stop hurting eventually. I lied and said yes. Grandfather announced a new rule at the next fight. Winners would now eat in front of the entire extended family, not just their opponents. He wanted the mothers to see their starving sons, to understand the price of defiance. My Aunt Maria lasted 10 minutes before breaking down, shoving her own plate toward her defeated son. Grandfather banned her from the next 3 dinners. Vincent's headaches worsened. During a particularly brutal fight between 2 14-year-olds, he collapsed in the garage, clutching his skull. The family doctor, grandfather's golf buddy, prescribed pain medication and suggested less stress. Nobody mentioned the obvious cause. I discovered grandfather had been visiting my school counselor weekly, providing updates on my mental state. Mrs. Vance now looked at me with pity rather than concern, fully convinced I was delusional. My teachers received copies of Dr. Brennan's reports, painting me as a troubled teen with violent fantasies. Roberto's breaking point came 3 weeks before my birthday. Forced to fight his younger brother, he refused to throw the final punch that would draw blood. Both boys went hungry. That night, Roberto packed a bag and disappeared. His parents filed a missing person report, but I knew he'd made it to his girlfriend's family in Nevada. One less ally, but I was glad he'd escaped. The younger cousin's transformation accelerated. They formed practice groups, meeting after school to perfect their techniques. 10-year-old Diego boasted about the moves grandfather taught him privately. The tradition was evolving, becoming self-sustaining. Even without the older generation's enforcement, these boys would continue the violence. My mother's weight loss became impossible to ignore. She'd given her portions to my sisters so often that her clothes hung loose on her frame. When I confronted her, she simply said, 2 more weeks, then you're free, and things will get easier. But we both knew grandfather would never let things get easier. Miguel's secret recordings multiplied. The 8-year-old had become our most valuable asset, his age making him invisible to the adults. He showed me footage of grandfather instructing the older boys on psychological warfare, how to break an opponent's spirit before the fight even began. But every video included other cousins' faces, implicating them in the system. Grandfather scheduled a family reunion for the week before my birthday. Cousins from other states would attend, including some who'd aged out of the fighting years ago. The real purpose was clear, witnesses for my final humiliation. He wanted every branch of the family to see me broken. I tried one last time with the authorities. A different police station. A different detective. Detective Williams, a woman with kind eyes who listened to my entire story. She took notes, asked follow-up questions, even seemed to believe me. Then she made a call to check my background and discovered Dr. Brennan's reports. The interview ended with pamphlets for mental health resources. Vincent developed a new strategy. During fights, he'd position himself to accidentally interfere when things went too far. A stumbled step here, a knocked over water bottle there. Small disruptions that prevented serious injuries. Grandfather noticed but couldn't prove intentionality. 3 weeks before my birthday, Luis began his final preparations. I watched him in the garage, practicing combinations on the heavy bag grandfather had installed. His technique was flawless, brutal. The scared 10-year-old I'd first fought had been replaced by a true believer. He caught me watching once and simply nodded, like an executioner acknowledging his condemned. My father's savings plan hit a snag. Grandfather, suspicious of everyone now, had tightened control over the family finances. Bank statements arrived at his house first. Any unusual withdrawals got questioned. My father managed to hide $300 in cash, nowhere near enough for escape. The family reunion arrived with cousins I hadn't seen in years. Men in their 20s and 30s, bearing old scars from their fighting days. They shared stories of their glory years, comparing techniques, laughing about the hunger. Not one of them spoke against the tradition. They'd been broken and rebuilt in grandfather's image. Grandfather made a spectacle of announcing my birthday fight. In front of 40 relatives, he declared it would be held at sunset when warriors proved themselves. Luis stood beside him, already wearing his fighting clothes. The message was clear. This wasn't just about tradition anymore. It was about crushing rebellion completely. That night, I met with Vincent and the few cousins still secretly resisting. We had evidence but no way to use it without destroying our family's financial stability. Miguel's videos, Roberto's photos, my documentation, all useless against grandfather's economic stranglehold. We were trapped between justice and survival. My 18th birthday dawned gray and humid. Extended family filled the house, their excitement palpable. Uncles who'd moved away returned to witness the spectacle. Cousins filmed everything on their phones, creating their own documentation of tradition's continuation. The garage had been decorated with banners reading "Strength Through Struggle" and "Brotherhood Bonds." Someone had repainted the chalk circle, making it wider to accommodate the expected violence. Folding chairs lined the walls for the audience. This wasn't just a fight, it was a ceremony. Luis warmed up in the corner, his focus absolute. Grandfather had given him new gloves, lighter ones that would cut easier. Every detail had been planned to ensure maximum damage. Uncle Tony tested the garage door, making sure it would lock properly. No escapes this time. I made one last check of our evidence cache at the abandoned building. Everything remained hidden, waiting for someday. Maybe when the younger cousins grew up, when grandfather's grip loosened with age, or maybe it would rot there forever, a monument to failed resistance. The extended family gathered as sunset approached. Mothers held their younger children close, whispering explanations about family tradition. The men formed their usual circle, but larger now, 3 rows deep. Grandfather sat in a special chair, elevated to see over the crowd. His glass eye caught the overhead light as he smiled. "Tonight, we remind everyone what happens to those who challenge family," grandfather announced. His voice carried absolute authority. "Luis has trained hard. He understands honor. He will teach a necessary lesson." They locked the garage door from the inside. No one would leave until blood hit concrete. I stood in the circle, feeling the weight of 40 relatives' expectations. Luis entered from the opposite side, muscles coiled, ready to destroy what remained of our childhood friendship. The fight began without ceremony. Luis attacked immediately. Combinations grandfather had drilled into him for weeks. I dodged, blocked, refused to engage. The crowd grew restless. Someone shouted for blood. Others demanded action. Luis's frustration built with each missed strike. He prepared for war, but found only evasion. His attacks grew wilder, more desperate. Grandfather's training couldn't account for an opponent who wouldn't fight back. The careful choreography collapsed into chaos. Then, Vincent acted. During a particularly vicious rush from Luis, Vincent accidentally knocked over the water table. The crash distracted everyone momentarily. Luis slipped on the wet concrete, going down hard. His elbow split on impact, blood flowing freely. The garage erupted in confusion. Technically, blood had hit concrete, but from a fall, not a strike. Grandfather stood, face purple with rage, but the rules were the rules. The fight was over. Luis lay on the concrete, staring at his bleeding elbow in shock. I helped him up, whispering an apology he didn't acknowledge. The crowd dispersed uncertainly, robbed of their spectacle. Grandfather's perfect ceremony had collapsed into farce. At dinner, I ate while Luis sat with an empty plate, his arm bandaged. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Grandfather's chosen warrior, defeated by clumsiness. The meal passed in tense silence, tradition fulfilled, but somehow broken. That night, grandfather summoned me to his study. He sat behind his desk, looking every one of his 78 years. For the first time, his hands shook without fear to hide it. "You won without winning," he said finally. "Get out. Take nothing. Never come back." I left with the clothes on my back and my father's $300.